They say the devil's in the details. And now, sitting alone in this hollow apartment surrounded by echoes of what used to be a life, I realized that's exactly where he was, lurking between spreadsheets and Friday night conference calls, hidden beneath neatly pressed blouses and carefully curated excuses. For months, I believed her. Over time, tight deadlines, corporate restructuring, all of it sounded legitimate enough, especially coming from her, my wife, Madison. She'd always been ambitious. Sharp as hell, too. One of those people who could speak in boardroom lingo and still sound human. So when she started working late more often, when the overtime became routine, I just figured she was climbing the ladder. I even admired her for it. Funny thing is, I was proud of her. The late dinners, the exhaustion in her eyes, the heels that clicked into the hallway just after midnight. I saw them as badges of hustle, not betrayal. I'd wait up for her every time, made her tea, asked about her day. She'd always say the same thing. Exhausting, but worth it. I never thought to ask worth it for what. The first red flag was the smell. Subtle, almost undetectable. Cologne. Not mine. Too bold, too expensive. I asked about it once. She laughed. Said her boss, Brandon, had brushed past her in the elevator. He wears that obnoxious crap like a teenager drowns himself in Axe. I laughed too. I trusted her. Brandon was the regional director, my director. Technically my boss. I'd met the guy. Lean, confident, too polished for his age. The kind of man who knew the power of eye contact and silence. He used both like weapons. I thought he was harmless. I was wrong. I didn't find out all at once. It unraveled slowly, like a bad thread in a favorite shirt you keep pulling because you just want it gone. The first tug came from Madison's corporate retreat in Miami. 3 days. Team building, she said. Brandon would be there, of course. She mentioned it casually, like it was just another bullet point in her agenda. I remember helping her pack. She wore a red blouse I'd never seen before. Said it was new, a treat to herself for landing a client. I kissed her goodbye at the airport. Told her I was proud. She smiled, but her eyes didn't match the smile. I ignored it. It wasn't until weeks later that I stumbled on the photos. They were buried deep in her cloud storage, forgotten or maybe hidden. One was from that retreat. Her in a bikini, Brandon behind her in the pool, his hand on her hip. Another was of their dinner. Candlelight, wine, the kind of intimacy you don't fake for business. The timestamp sealed it. Every overtime excuse, every delay, every weekend she said she was too tired to talk. Each one matched a flight, a hotel, a dinner. I confronted her. She didn't deny it. She just looked at me, exhausted, like I was the one asking too much. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said. It started with that stupid holiday party in December. He flirted. I flirted back. I was tipsy. You were in the kitchen cleaning up, and she stopped herself. It wasn't supposed to go this far. That line. Wasn't supposed to. As if it were gravity's fault she kept falling into his hotel room. I thought maybe it would help, she said. Brandon's influential. He is pull. I didn't sleep with him to hurt you. I thought I'd get ahead. I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so clean, so transactional. My wife, trading loyalty for leverage. Marriage for mobility. I should have walked out then. But I didn't. I needed to know more. How long? Where? If it was just him. She confessed, half-heartedly, the way someone does when they're trying to frame their sins as misunderstandings. Said it was a mistake, repeated like a mantra. Said it only happened on trips, that they never slept together in town. That was supposed to make it better, I think. Like geography could sanctify infidelity. She told me it ended. That it wasn't going anywhere. It was never about love, she said. Good. Because what I feel now isn't love either. This is the part of the story where most men rage. Throw a chair. Smash a mirror. I didn't. I just sat on the couch, looked at her, and realized something terrifying. I didn't know this woman at all. I thought we were building something together. A life. A future. A foundation. But she'd been laying bricks in another direction the whole time, one screw at a time, in another man's hotel bed. Now I'm not sure what I'm building. But it's not reconciliation. This was just the beginning. It was supposed to be a celebration. End of quarter results came in strong. Our branch exceeded targets, and corporate wanted to show us some love. They rented out a rooftop bar downtown, the kind with dim lighting, overpriced cocktails, and a view you can only enjoy if you're too drunk to remember how many hours you worked just to afford a drink there. Madison wore a black dress that night, tied in the way that makes you pause and wonder if she's dressing for you or for someone else. I remember watching her from across the room as she laughed at Brandon's jokes, her hand brushing his arm a little too often to be casual. He had a way of leaning in just close enough, saying things too low for anyone else to hear. I stood off to the side nursing a bourbon, telling myself not to overthink it. Office dynamics. Networking. Flirting. Maybe, but harmless. I'd seen her smile like that before, but never at me during work events. That should have been my first clue. They danced. That's what really stuck with me. After enough drinks, they all made their way to the dance floor. Her, Brandon, a couple of their team leads. I stayed behind at the table, talking to a logistics guy about shipment delays in the Midwest. The music was too loud, the lights too dim, but I still saw her. Her head thrown back, laughing at something Brandon whispered. His hands low on her waist. Too low. I looked away before it got worse. But not before it sank in. Later that night, I asked her about it. Casually. Like a joke. You and Brandon looked pretty cozy on the dance floor. She rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. It was just dancing. You know how he is. He flirts with everyone. That's just his personality. She was brushing her hair out in the bathroom mirror, not even turning to look at me. Her tone was flat, bored. Like the entire question was beneath her. I dropped it. Because I trusted her. Because I didn't want to be that guy. The paranoid husband who can't handle a little harmless fun. That night, we didn't have sex. She said she was tired. Hungover. Whatever excuse fit. I stayed up, lying next to her, staring at the ceiling and listening to her breathe. I remember wondering if something had changed, or if I just noticed it too late. The next business trip came 2 weeks later. Dallas. 3 days. All-hands strategy meetings. Brandon was leading the sessions. Madison volunteered to present during the Q2 forecast breakout. I kissed her goodbye in the morning, and she told me not to worry. I'll text you from the hotel, she said. Don't let the cat starve. That night, no text came. I called around 10 straight to voicemail. She messaged me at midnight with a picture of a cocktail and the words, team debriefing, going late, love you. I believed her. I wish I hadn't. I found out later they only booked one room. Not through her, of course. Through a mutual friend, Brian from finance. He let it slip over beers one afternoon, talking about the trip. Yeah, man, the hotel was packed. We all had to double up. Crazy that your wife got stuck sharing with Brandon, huh? He said it like it was nothing. Like it wasn't the sentence that would rot my brain for weeks. I kept a straight face. Didn't let on. But inside, I felt something twist. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wanted to see if she'd lie. I waited. The next day I casually asked, how was the hotel? Decent rooms. She blinked. Yeah, fine. Just your standard Marriott. Nothing special. I stared at her. She didn't flinch. Didn't stutter. That was almost worse than the lie itself, the ease of it. She kept up the act for a while. Late hours. More business trips. A new wardrobe that was suddenly more professional. She started wearing perfume again. Something sweet and expensive that lingered on her collar even after she said she'd been working late in the office. Her phone got a new passcode. Just security, she said. Company policy. I didn't question it. I should have. But by then, I wasn't sure I wanted the truth. I wasn't ready for what came next. It was a Sunday morning, 2 months later, when the truth finally forced its way into the open. We were having coffee in the kitchen. She was scrolling through her phone, laughing at some meme, and I looked at her and just said it. Are you sleeping with Brandon? No build-up. No anger. Just a quiet question. Her eyes froze. For 1 second, the mask slipped. I saw something cold pass across her face. Then it was gone. What the hell kind of question is that? She said. But her voice was too measured. Too calm. I didn't answer. I just waited. She stared at me, jaw clenched, and then she broke. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she said. It was just supposed to be one time. A mistake. Then she told me everything, or what I assume was the version of everything she thought I could stomach. It started that night at the rooftop party. The dancing. The flirtation. I didn't plan it, she said. But I also didn't stop it. She said they were drunk. That it just happened. But it didn't stop there. Of course it didn't. One night turned into hotel rooms and business trips and texts that I never saw because they used private messaging apps. She said it was about feeling powerful. About being seen. He made me feel like I mattered, she said. Like my ideas were worth something. I asked her if it was worth it. She didn't answer. I should have thrown her out right then. I should have screamed. But all I did was nod. I got up, poured myself another cup of coffee, and said, "You know what hurts the most? It's not that you did it. It's that you made me believe you were better than this." She didn't reply. She just stood there, arms crossed, like the victim. She still lives here. For now. Sleeping in the guest room while we pretend our lives aren't imploding in slow motion. But I see her watching me now, trying to guess what I'll do next. And that's good. Let her wonder. I'm not playing defense anymore. She cried the way an actress does on a talk show. Perfectly measured. Not too messy, not too loud. Just enough to seem human. Her voice broke in all the right places, her hands trembling as she recited the lines she probably rehearsed in the mirror. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lost. You've been so distant. That last part almost made me laugh. Distant. I was the one waiting up with dinner. I was the one who gave up weekend trips so she could fly off to conferences. I was the one who rearranged my entire life so she could chase her career. But sure, blame my distance. It's easier than admitting you traded your integrity for a few nights in a hotel room with your boss. She sat on the edge of the couch like she was auditioning for sympathy, dabbing her eyes with a tissue she hadn't used until I walked into the room. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said, barely above a whisper. I stayed quiet, watching her, watching the way her mascara stayed intact, even though she claimed she'd been crying for hours. "You've changed," she added, as if that would explain away the months of deception. I almost respected the audacity. Almost. Because she wasn't crying when she was sharing a room with Brandon in Chicago. She wasn't sobbing when she clicked confirm booking on that upgraded suite in San Diego. She only started crying once I found out. Once the script flipped and the spotlight shifted. That's the part that stuck with me. The betrayal didn't crush me. Her reaction to being caught did. Because I realized then, she wasn't sorry. She was just exposed. And exposed people get dangerous. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I sat down across from her and asked the one question that had been festering in my head for weeks. "Did you ever plan to stop?" Her silence was the answer. I nodded, feeling the weight settle in my chest. That's what I thought. She looked away, the performance faltering. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to find a new tactic. That's when the next line came. I felt invisible. Brandon made me feel important. There it was. The justification. The spiritual buzzword salad meant to absolve her. Invisible. As if that excused disloyalty. As if I had ever made her feel like less than a partner. I'd always supported her. Encouraged her. Stayed home when she wanted to chase a promotion. Cooked dinners she never showed up for. Listened to her talk about market forecasts while pretending to care about retail logistics. But none of that mattered, apparently. Not next to Brandon's hand on her thigh in a dark hotel room. Not when he whispered things in her ear while I stayed home thinking she was burning the midnight oil for us. I started digging after that conversation. Quietly. Methodically. Like a man cataloging the remains of a car crash before the flames go out. I went through our shared calendar, cross-referenced the trips she'd taken. I pulled credit card statements. Found charges from bars and cities she never mentioned. Spa appointments. Two-person dinners billed to our joint card. Just under the threshold that would flag suspicion. I checked her Google account, found her old locations. Miami, Phoenix, once even New York. The timeline painted a picture far uglier than anything she confessed. This wasn't a fling. This was sustained, coordinated, hidden with the precision of someone who'd done it before, or at least fantasized about doing it for a long time. When I confronted her with it, she didn't deny it. She just collapsed into the same loop. "I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I didn't know what I was doing." She knew exactly what she was doing. She lied to my face. Repeatedly. She let me cook dinner for her while she was still undressing in some hotel room 3 states away. She came home smelling like him and told me she loved me. She curled into bed beside me with his breath still on her skin. That's not a mistake. That's intent. Then came the pivot. The shift from victim to martyr. I thought maybe if I got the promotion, things would be better between us. I could contribute more. Be more. Be more. Like sleeping with Brandon was a shortcut to self-worth. She tried to say it was a career move. That they had talked about her transferring departments. That he promised her a team of her own. I asked her if she thought screwing her boss was an acceptable part of professional development. She didn't like that question. Said I was twisting her words. But she never answered it. She said she loved me. That was the last card in her deck. Despite everything, she whispered, "I still love you." I didn't respond. Because love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't siphon loyalty to fund a side relationship with your husband's superior. Love doesn't lie, cheat, and then cry when caught. I looked at her like a stranger. And that's exactly what she was now. The crazy thing is, there were signs. I can see them all now. Her sudden fixation on her image. New clothes. Teeth whitening. Her phone always face down. The way she flinched when I asked about Brandon by name. The way she started turning every small disagreement into a referendum on our marriage. Maybe we're just not compatible anymore. That was a big one. Classic deflection. Planting the idea of dysfunction so she could justify the escape route she was already sprinting down. She sleeps in the guest room now. I let her stay for appearance's sake, while I plan the quiet detonation of our life together. She thinks I'm stalling. She doesn't know I've already spoken to a lawyer. Doesn't know I've documented everything. The trips. The charges. The messages. I'm not going to burn her down in public. That's too easy. Too expected. I'm going to walk away with my dignity and leave her to explain to everyone else why her house is suddenly empty, why the man who loved her stopped looking back. Let her wear the victim mask. Let her cry her crocodile tears and tell her friends I grew distant. Let them believe it. Let them comfort her. Because when this ends, it's going to end in silence. Cold, cutting, final. And she'll never even see it coming. She kept showing up to work like nothing happened, hair curled, eyes bright, her badge swinging confidently from her blazer like she hadn't spent months cheating on me with the man who signed both our paychecks. Brandon still walked through the office like he owned the oxygen, air kissing. Secretaries slapping the backs of junior managers, flashing that politician's grin that always made me want to break his jaw. I watched them from my cubicle a few rows down, always careful, always discreet. She never looked in my direction, not really, but I could feel her eyes when she thought I wasn't paying attention, the weight of guilt, or maybe curiosity, checking if I'd fold, if I'd implode, but I didn't. I showed up every day on time, tie straight, smile in place. I sat in meetings and took notes and even laughed at Brandon's jokes when necessary because I knew something they didn't. I was planning my exit, and I wasn't leaving quietly. The thing about working in corporate is that everyone's playing chess, but most don't know the rules. They gossip, trade favors, build fragile alliances over catered lunches and Slack channels, but no one expects the quiet guy, the one who listens more than he talks, to be the one holding the knife. I started collecting things, not just emotionally, but literally: emails, expense reports, meeting records. I watched how they moved, how they scheduled their travel, how she always somehow ended up on the same itinerary as him, even when the departments didn't overlap. I flagged the nights they stayed late, always on the same nights, always ending in charges at bars near the office. I build a case brick by silent brick, because when you work in HR like I do, you know how to read the terrain. You know what counts as actionable and what's just rumor. Madison must have thought I'd break, file for divorce, leave town, disappear quietly like the loyal fool she assumed I was, but I didn't. Instead, I started inviting people out for drinks, our mutuals, folks from sales and operations, the people who saw things but never knew what to make of them. I let them talk, I let them slip. I didn't ask much, just enough to make them think I already knew. And they did the rest. Oh yeah, I always thought something was off with those two. One said, "Remember that offsite in Atlanta?" They didn't even pretend to stay in separate rooms. Another added, "It was all hearsay technically, but hearsay with consistent details starts to sound a lot like truth, especially when it starts circulating beyond the confines of our building." Then came the gift, the anonymous tip, an email sent to the ethics hotline with screenshots, a blurred photo of Brandon and Madison kissing in what looked like a hotel elevator. The sender was a concerned employee. I didn't write it, but I know who did, and let's just say not everyone Brandon stepped on over the years has forgiven him. My role was simple. I made sure the email landed on the right desk, quietly redirected it, flagged it, ensured it was seen and not buried. HR policy requires an investigation when evidence like that surfaces, especially when it involves a superior and a direct report. They called it a routine internal review, but everyone knew what it really was. Brandon looked pale in the Monday morning meeting. Madison didn't show up that day. No one said why, but the whispering started. The same whispering she once used to climb the ladder now became the buzzsaw chewing through her reputation. I wish I could say I felt triumphant, but it wasn't that simple. Revenge doesn't feel like a firework. It feels like a cold wind, like watching someone drown from a distance and realizing you don't care enough to save them, just enough to watch. I passed Brandon in the hallway. Later that week, he looked at me, and for the first time ever, there was no smirk, just a flicker of something unfamiliar, fear. He knew I knew, but worse, he didn't know what I'd do with it. I stopped just long enough to meet his eyes. Gave him a polite nod, then kept walking. I didn't need to say a word. That silence was its own sentence. Madison cornered me in the parking garage that Thursday, eyes red, face pale, her voice tight with panic. "What are you doing?" she hissed. I shrugged, leaning against the car like we were just co-workers chatting after hours. "I don't know what you mean." She clenched her jaw. "Don't play dumb. You think this is funny, trying to ruin me?" I tilted my head. "You ruined yourself. I just stopped protecting you." She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped, maybe realizing she didn't have a case. She betrayed me, lied, used me, and now the safety net was gone. I stepped closer, not threatening, just honest. "You climbed your little ladder on my back, Maddie, and now it's collapsing under you. I hope it was worth it." Her lip trembled just slightly. "You're destroying everything." "No," I said calmly. "I'm just letting gravity do its job." She didn't respond. She just turned and walked away, heels clicking like the last echo of the life we used to have. I stayed in that garage long after she left, thinking about how easy it would be to take T is further to leak, more to go public, to torch the whole damn place. But I didn't, not yet, because some fires burn hotter when you let them smolder, and I wasn't done watching her sweat. She thought this would end with tears, with me begging her to come back, or screaming in some fit of heartbreak, but it ends in silence and careful moves and consequences that come not all at once, but in slow, steady waves. This isn't vengeance, it's justice with a spreadsheet and a paper trail. It didn't happen all at once, the death of loyalty. It was a slow bleed, a quiet corrosion like rust spreading underneath polished chrome. I used to think love was something you held on to even when it hurt, something worth fighting for. But after Madison, I realized love without loyalty is just a performance, and I'd been clapping for an actress who forgot her lines months ago. Every morning, I'd wake up to the sound of her moving through the kitchen like nothing had changed, the clink of her spoon in the coffee mug, the faint hum of whatever bullshit podcast she'd started listening to about empowerment or mindfulness or whatever new mantra helped her justify the wreckage she left behind. She acted like we were just having a rough patch, like couples therapy, and a few weekend getaways would fix what she'd shattered. I didn't argue. I let her believe it because I wanted to see how long she'd pretend before the guilt caught up or the fallout landed. But it never did. Not really. Guilt was never something Madison wore for long. At work, things were unraveling faster than she realized. HR had launched their investigation. Brandon was put on administrative leave pending review. She tried to downplay it, said it was all blown out of proportion, that she and Brandon were just close colleagues, that people were jealous of their success. The same people she used to laugh with now avoided her in the hallway emails when unanswered meetings were rescheduled, without her name in the invite, and still she clung to the idea that this was temporary, a hiccup, a misunderstanding. I watched her spiral in slow motion, and I never said a word. The day she broke was a Thursday, rain pounding on the roof of our shared apartment, her voice low and hoarse as she sat across from me on the edge of the couch. "I need you," she said, her hands trembling, fingers twisting a loose thread on her sleeve. I looked at her, not cold, not cruel, just empty, like the last ember of a fire that used to keep us warm and now just gave off smoke. "Why now?" I asked, her tone cracked. "Because I thought I could fix it, but I can't, not without you." I didn't reply right away. I studied her face, the way her makeup was smudged like she'd been crying in the car before she came in, the way her shoulders sagged, not with grief, but with consequence, finally catching up to a woman who thought she could outrun it. She reached for my hand, and for a second, I let her touch me skin on skin, the same way it used to feel like home, but this time it felt like theft, and I pulled away slowly, deliberately. "You didn't just cheat," I said. "You lied. You stole time from me, trust from me. You used my silence as a shield while you got what you wanted. Now you're only here because everything else is burning." She looked away, but didn't argue because she knew it was true. I stood up, walked to the window, the rain making everything outside blur into gray. "You know what hurts most?" I asked. She shook her head. "It's not the affair, it's that I would have forgiven you if you'd told me the truth from the start. I would have fought for us if you hadn't been so quick to sell us off for a conference badge and a night in a hotel. But now I don't see a future, I just see ash." She stayed silent, tears finally sliding down her face, and I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not relief, not pain, just closure, cold and final. I left her there on the couch, grabbed my keys, and walked out into the rain, not for dramatic effect, not to punish her, but because I needed air. I needed space away from the walls that had heard too many lies from lips that once said "I do" and meant it. That night I checked into a hotel, a cheap one with flickering hallway lights and a buzzing ice machine, but it was mine. I ordered takeout, turned off my phone, and lay on the stiff mattress staring at the ceiling, realizing for the first time in months I felt peace, not joy, not hope, but peace, like something heavy had finally slipped off my shoulders. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just let it go, one breath at a time. The idea of her, the illusion of us, the fantasy that loyalty means permanence. Loyalty dies quietly, not with a bang, but with a shrug and a suitcase left by the door, and when it does, you don't chase it, you don't beg it back, you let it go, and you rebuild, not to prove anything, but because survival demands it. There's a moment after betrayal when everything goes still, not calm, not quiet, just still, like the breath you hold before a punch lands, or the silence before a door slams shut. I woke up in that hotel room, stiff, sore, and strangely clear the decision had already been made. I wasn't staying, not in the marriage, not in the job, not in the damn apartment with its shared closet and hollow echoes of what used to be. I didn't rage, I didn't send some dramatic message or leave a note on the fridge. I just started moving one step at a time like clockwork, and that's how the exit strategy began. First, I closed the joint accounts, froze the credit cards, moved my direct deposit into a private bank she didn't know existed. I let her wake up to a declined transaction at her favorite cafe, a confused look at her phone followed by the slow horror of realizing control was slipping through her fingers the way it had been slipping through mine for months. She called, I didn't answer. She texted, "Is there a problem with the account?" I left it on red because the real problem wasn't with the account. It was with her, and I wasn't fixing either. Next, I met with my lawyer. I'd done my research by then, had every receipt, every message, every booking confirmation she made with Brandon, the hotel invoices, the overlapping trips, the photo a coworker took at a gala where their hands were just a little too familiar. I had time-stamped emails with the kind of language HR departments salivate over, and most importantly, I had patience. The lawyer read through the folder, his expression unreadable until he finally looked up and said, "You've built a hell of a case." I just nodded. That was the point. I waited a week, then served her the papers on a Friday morning. Just after she got out of the shower, she answered the door in a robe dripping, wet mascara still smeared from whatever late night she'd dragged herself through. The courier didn't flinch, just handed her the manila envelope and left her standing there stunned. I watched from my car, half a block away, not for theatrics, just to make sure it landed. It did. She stood there for a full minute before tearing it open, the way her body folded when she realized what it was. That was the closest thing to justice I'd seen since this all started. She called that night 6 times, left voicemails ranging from apology to fury to begging, said she was willing to go to counseling, willing to quit her job, said Brandon didn't mean anything, said it was a mistake, said we could start over, but you can't rebuild a house with rotten wood, and every word from her mouth sounded like termites. I didn't reply, didn't need to. She'd made her choices, and I was finally making mine. I resigned from the company the same week, not with a blaze of glory or a scathing email, just a short professional letter to HR citing personal reasons. I didn't want to be the guy who stayed behind in the ruins watching her rebuild a lie with someone else. I wanted out, clean, gone, detached, and light. I packed my desk in silence, didn't say goodbye to most people, didn't need to. The ones who mattered knew, and the ones who didn't would find out soon enough. The last thing I did before I walked out was leave a single envelope on Brandon's desk. No name, no return address, just one photo inside, a printed copy of the hotel receipt from that night in Chicago, room 418, his name and hers side by side, charged to the corporate card stapled to a memo I knew his wife would see because I mailed it to her office, not their home. I figured she deserved the truth too, and I wasn't about to keep his secret just because mine had blown up. I drove across state lines that night, no plan, no destination, just a tank full of gas and a list of places I didn't want to be anymore. I ended up in a town with a cheap motel and a diner that didn't ask questions. I paid cash. I slept like a man who'd been carrying dead weight for too long and finally dropped it. Madison still texts, sometimes, always late, always a little too long, messages about how she's in therapy, now how she's reading books on shame and growth, how she wishes things could have gone differently. I don't block her, I let them come, because every message is a reminder of what I walked away from and why I'll never go back. The exit strategy wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about reclaiming something, about remembering that love without respect is just noise, and that silence can be the loudest way to say goodbye. She still doesn't understand what she lost, not really. She thinks it was the apartment, or the steady hand on her lower back during office parties. Maybe she thinks it was the way I folded her laundry just the way she liked it, or the dinners I cooked without asking, because I knew her moods better than she did herself. But that's not what she lost. She lost the man who would have walked through fire for her, the man who kept her secrets before she made him one of them. She lost the quiet loyalty, the kind that doesn't announce itself, but shows up day after day without needing applause, and she'll never get that again, not from Brandon, not from whoever comes next, not from anyone who sees her now for what she really is, because trust once broken doesn't regrow, it withers. It hardens, it becomes a mirror she can't look into without flinching. I heard through mutuals that Brandon didn't survive the review. HR recommended termination, and the board didn't hesitate. Apparently, there were other skeletons in his closet, ones I never had to dig for, because people like him always leave a trail. Madison stayed for a while. They moved her to a different department, tried to keep it quiet, but the damage was done. Her reputation shriveled under the fluorescent lights and the whispers that never quite stopped. She walked through the building like a Ghost trying to smile, trying to pretend the walls weren't closing in, but they were, and everyone knew it. She ended up quitting 3 months later, probably thought it looked better than being pushed out. She sent me an email the day she left, short, no drama, just one line. I miss the version of me that existed when you still loved me. I didn't reply because that version of her died long before I ever stopped loving her. She killed it when she made a choice and kept making it every day she let another man into the space we built. I used to wonder if she regretted it, not just getting caught, but the act itself. I don't anymore because I realized regret doesn't fix anything, it just fills the silence. When consequences start speaking louder than excuses. I started over in a city that didn't know me. No one asked why I left, and I didn't offer the story. I rented a small apartment, 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, the kind of place that feels temporary until it doesn't. I got a job at a smaller firm, nothing flashy. Just honest work with people who laugh like they mean it. I started sleeping through the night again, stopped checking my phone for phantom messages, stopped waiting for someone to fix what I already buried, and one day I realized I wasn't surviving anymore. I was just living like a man who'd crawled out of a fire and finally realized he didn't miss the flames. Sometimes I think about her, not often, and not with rage, more like a scar I run my thumb over just to remind myself it healed. I imagine her waking up alone, maybe in a better apartment, maybe not, maybe with a new man, maybe not. I imagine her reaching for her phone, out of habit, seeing my name in old messages, rereading them, and wondering how she lost something so steady, so stupidly faithful, and maybe for a second she wishes she'd done it differently, but that second passes and she goes back to whatever version of truth she tells herself now, because that's how people like her survive. They rewrite the story, they frame the villain, they say things like, "We grew apart," or "It just wasn't working." They never say, "I destroyed him because I was selfish and thought I'd never get caught." She lost more than a husband. She lost the benefit of the doubt, the shelter of being believed, without question, the quiet warmth of knowing someone had your back no matter how bad the day got. She lost a future built on trust and traded it for a thrill that expired before the hotel sheets cooled, and the worst part is she'll never really know it, not fully, because people like Madison can only see what's gone when it stops orbiting around them, and by then it's already too late. I'm not angry, not anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm just done. I packed up the version of me that belonged to her, folded it into the past, and left it there. And every step I take now is a step away from that man and toward the one who learned the hard way that love means nothing without respect, and loyalty is not something you give to someone who sees you as a stepping stone on the way to somewhere else. It was a Wednesday, mid-October, gray sky, light drizzle, the kind of day that doesn't ask for attention but lingers in your bones like an old bruise. I was walking out of a bookstore 2 blocks from my new place when I saw her across the street, standing near the cafe window. Paper cup in hand, hair tied back in that way she always used to when she didn't want to be noticed, which of course meant she did. She hadn't seen me yet. Her eyes were on her phone, thumb scrolling, lips tight, no smile, no makeup, not the polished Madison the world used to know, just a woman in a coat 2 sizes too big, standing in the shadow of the life she used to wear like armor. I could have walked away, could have let her be a passing face in the fog of my past, but something kept my feet planted, and before I could stop it, her eyes flicked up and caught mine, and for a second everything went still. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just stared like she wasn't sure if I was real or some echo her brain conjured out of guilt or habit. I walked over slow, measured my heart steady, because I'd already buried what needed burying, and now this was just cleanup duty. She looked older, not in years, but in weight, like the truth had finally settled on her shoulders and refused to leave. Her voice, when it came, was barely above the rain. "I didn't think I'd see you again." I nodded. "Neither did I." We stood there for a beat, maybe 2. The street noise muffled the world moving on without caring who we used to be or what we ruined. She asked if I wanted to sit. I agreed, not out of kindness or curiosity, but because some endings deserve to be witnessed. We sat at a corner table, the air between us thick with all the things we didn't need to say. She didn't launch into apologies this time, no tears, no speeches, just silence, the kind that weighs more than words. Eventually she said, "I've been doing better, therapy, new job, nothing big, but it's mine." I nodded again, not because I cared, but because I respected the honesty. If it was honesty she asked about me, I kept it brief. New city, new start, peace and quiet. She smiled, the smallest, most tired smile I've ever seen, and whispered, "You look better." I didn't reply. She reached into her coat, pulled out a small envelope, pushed it across the table. "I found this the other day, thought you should have it." Inside was a photo of us from years ago, before the rot, before the lies, before Brandon. It was taken on our anniversary in some beach town neither of us remembered the name of anymore. We looked happy, not performative, but real. She'd written something on the back end, her looping handwriting, a single sentence. I didn't know what I had until I lost it. I slid the photo back across the table. "Keep it, you'll need the reminder more than I will." Her hand trembled slightly, but she said nothing. We parted outside, no hugs, no promises, no illusions. She looked like she wanted to say something more but couldn't find the words, and I wasn't offering any lifeline. She turned left, I turned right, and that was the last time I ever saw her. No dramatic goodbye, no closure wrapped in bows, just two people who used to mean everything now meaning nothing, not even enough for a second glance over the shoulder. As I walked back to my apartment, the rain started again, colder now, but I didn't hurry. I let it soak in like proof that I was still here, still standing, still moving, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man picking up the pieces. I felt like a man who'd stopped carrying the wreckage of someone else's choices and started walking toward whatever came next. Because that's the thing about endings, they don't always scream. Sometimes they whisper, sometimes they look you in the eye across a cafe table and say nothing at all, but you still hear it clear as day. It's over, and you survived it.